Welcome back to our channel, Salty Light. Thank you for stopping by. I'm Panita, and this time with me I have...
Tim. My name's Tim. And this week we're really excited to interview Kate Dumke. She's one of the people who help us out in Salty Light here. Every week we're trying to bring new fun stories of what God's doing in people's lives, and we're really excited to have her on this week. Get a little Q&A with her after. Big shout out to Isaac Hendricks running the camera this week, as we needed an extra hand. So, because I'm helping do the interview. So that's about all we have.
That's it.
Hi, I'm Kate Dumke, and today I am here to share about the question, what if, and what God does when you ask that question. It says in the Bible that the devil seeks to steal, kill, and destroy, but I want to talk about how God does release, restore, and revive. I was exposed to pornography when I was 11 years old, and by the time I was 13, I was a full-blown addict. All I did all the time was dedicate myself to pornography, and all of my mind, will, and emotions went into that. By the time I was 17, I had no depth of emotion. If I had to explain it, it's like everything from the neck down was empty and dead and numb, and I could only feel in my head. The only thing I really felt was anger and hatred and anxiety and all sorts of negative emotions, insecurity, all that. I tried everything. I was saved by the time I was 9, and I did all the right things. I prayed, I read the Bible, I got accountability partners, I told my parents, I told my friends, I told my small group leaders, I did everything. I got covenant eyes, I failed, and I couldn't get free of it no matter what I did. It continued for about 9 years, and I had lost all hope. I had lost all hope that I was ever going to be free. I'd lost a lot more than that too. But then God stepped in. It started with my parents going to a crew dinner. I didn't want to go. In fact, I was really grumpy that night, but I went with my parents anyway because they had a seat that was reserved for me. And I walked in that room with my arms crossed. And they uncrossed pretty darn quick because God was in that room. And I had spent my whole life trying to get to God, and I couldn't. I knew 100 Bible verses by the time I was 4. I knew every Sunday school answer you could imagine. By that time, I could wax philosophical religious bowl with the best of them, and I had no idea who God was. But I knew he was in that room. So, as the night wore on, and as my excitement got higher and higher, I did something audacious. I asked God that if he wanted me to get involved in crew somehow, I wanted to talk to that man on the stage. I was afraid of God, so asking him for something was unbelievably audacious. Asking him to talk to a man on the stage when I was one of 1,000 people in the room, way more audacious. But I did it. And wouldn't you know it, the night ended, and my parents stood up from that table on the far side of the room, and they beelined all the way across the room straight to that man. My parents, who cannot walk into a room without talking to every single person in it, didn't talk to a single person, and went straight to Mr. Ryan Nadel, the man on the stage. So I took it for what it was, God extending his hand to me. And I told him I had a pornography problem, and I thought that I was supposed to get involved with crew some way. He pointed me to a purity group, and from there I met a young lady who was going to be my best friend for the next couple of years of my life, and who was going to ultimately save my life. From her, I met another young lady who introduced me to God in ways that I had never imagined. She told me about things that God did that I had heard of him doing in the Bible or in autobiographies of missionaries or somewhere in a country in some really special circumstance, but never for me or here or now. But she had experienced the here, now, and me. And so I started asking myself a really wild question. I started asking myself, what if? What if God would do those things for me? And he used that question. A couple of months later, my best friend and I, we'd moved in together, and another friend were praying on the phone together, and some really amazing things were happening. The good devil decided to strike back, as he usually But God did something that he always does when he's in a fight. He took what the enemy meant for evil, to quote a really good song, and he turned it to good. And that night, God overcame my addiction. See, addiction is like a collar on your neck. You are helpless to it. I bear all responsibility for the choices I made. But when you have a collar on your neck, you're not really in a position to win against the person holding the lead. That night, God broke off the collar, and I could win, and I did, every day from then on. The devil stole from me. He stole my purity, he stole my security, my confidence, my respect, my worth for other people and for myself. He stole my dreams of having a family, my desire to have a family, and more that I could not even describe to you. But God released me from that. And God not only released me from the addiction, but he released into my life respect, confidence, love, peace, a depth of emotion that I couldn't even imagine beforehand, and way more than that, way more than the devil ever stole from me. The second example that I want to share with you is a physical one. I had been homeschooled up until 12 years old. When I turned 12, my parents put me in public school, and I got sick. I got really, really sick. I missed probably about 60 days of school that first year, and I was sick all the other days. I just wasn't that sick. Well, we went to doctors, we went to psychiatrists, we went to pediatricians, we went to neurologists, we went to chiropractors, we went to psychologists, alternative doctors, all the way back around the circle with a bunch of ones that I couldn't even name. And everybody had a really fancy name for the symptoms and no explanation for the cause. By the time I was 19, I had really given up hope. I thought it was just me, when I didn't think it was just in my head. But God. My mom heard about a doctor, and she convinced me, and by convinced me, I mean forced me, to go to a dinner that they were hosting to talk about their treatment program. Those doctors correctly diagnosed me as having chronic Lyme disease, and they successfully treated me. They didn't cure me, but I would say they probably gave me a 20% increase in my quality of life, and that was enough. It was enough to keep me in the fight, because 20% is everything when you're in pain all the time. I figured with 20%, I would be able to survive. But God didn't want me to survive. He wanted me to thrive. So he stepped in. It happened when I was at the church that I had started attending with my best friend. Really great church. There's a public speaker that had come in, and I don't even remember what he was talking about, but at the end of his speech, he said to us, "If you need something broken off in your life, I'd like you to come up and I'll pray for you." And God said, "Go." And I said, "No." We argued, and I finally admitted that he wanted me to go up, and I said, "What do you want me to pray for broken off? Do you want me to pray for pride? Do you want me to pray for anxiety? What do you want?" And he said, "Lyme disease." I said, "No." We argued. He won. I went up. So I stood up there, and I remember just holding myself so hard, fighting with everything I had in me to stay up there, because I was afraid that God wasn't going to show up. I was afraid that that man was going to come and pray for me, and nothing was going to happen, just like it happened dozens of times in dozens of doctors' offices over almost a dozen years. But you know, that guy came up to me, he said a few simple words, and I felt a weight lift from me. And this overwhelming sense of relief and joy bubbled up inside of me, and the words, "It's gone," came out of my mouth. The years since then, it has been so obvious that God has indeed healed me. So obvious. I am not in pain all the time anymore. I'm not in pain barely ever. I have so much clarity of thought. I can speak clearly. I can do things I never imagined I could do. The devil destroyed in me using that sickness more than just my will to do things and my emotions. He destroyed me physically in ways that, unless you've experienced chronic sickness, you really can't understand. But God restored me, because I asked the question, what if? And that man who prayed had the faith to believe. I didn't. but he did. So the third example I want to share is one of the devil trying to kill me, and of God saying, I don't think so. Before any of the other things I mentioned, I struggled with depression. I can't even remember when it started. I have had it for as long as I remembered. And I couldn't tell you the first time that I had suicidal thoughts because they were always with me. And I think, like many people who struggle with suicidal thoughts, I didn't take it seriously because of that. But it was serious, and it wasn't me. As all the circumstances that I've already described, and more that I haven't, happened in my life, as more and more was stolen from me and destroyed in me, there was less of a reason to hold on, and there was less of a reason to fight it. There was less of a reason to want to live. And it got worse, and it got more and more prevalent. When I was 18, 19, I had a very, very public, very, very serious breakdown, and it landed me in the ER. It was like, while it was happening, I was a passenger in my own body, and I would say I probably was. And the part of me that was uninfected, watching me do these things, was really relieved, because I thought maybe, finally, my body was showing that there was something actually wrong with me. It wasn't just in my head, and I thought maybe it would be an answer. So a couple of hours later, when the doctor came in after I had calmed down and told me I had an anxiety attack, I broke. I absolutely shattered. And all of the thousands of abusive, horrible voices that were my constant companions in my head went completely silent, and the only thing I heard was, I want to die. That's it. I'm done. I want to die. And that was the night that I realized I might actually commit suicide. Well, a couple months passed, and my symptoms kept going. In fact, they got worse. And they were concerning enough that we were seeing neurologists and getting MRIs. I was getting tested for things like MS and brain cancer. There was this sick hope in me that I did have those things or something like it, because I was desperate. I was desperate to not live like that. I was desperate to die, and I thought that was my only way out. So I was hoping for something that would make me really sick for a couple of years and then would kill me. So when I called the nurse's office, and she picked up the phone and said, your blood work came back clean. Mindy says it's fibromyalgia, okay? I shattered some more, because I knew what fibromyalgia meant. Fibromyalgia meant no hope, it meant no recourse, and it meant no cure. It meant for the next 60 or 70 god-awful years of my life, I was going to get worse and worse, and there was nothing to be done about it, because I couldn't go on pain pills. I was an addict. That was when I knew that I was going to commit suicide. That I probably was only going to make it a couple more months, because pain like that wears away at you, and it makes you do things you never thought you were going to do. But God. The funny thing is, the devil had been trying to kill me from the womb. There was a doctor that my mom was seeing when she was pregnant with me, and he suggested that she have an abortion because I might be born with Down syndrome. And he didn't stop there, and the depression was not the most of it. But all of those decades that he spent trying to kill me, all of that work that he put into pushing me into this coffin that he'd made with all of his strength was undone. Not in a single moment like the other things I shared, but by the very presence of God in my life. Just gone. Just like that. Because even more than God saying to something, leave, that massive stronghold was overcome because God's very presence is life-giving. The devil sought to kill me, but God revived me. He pulled me out of the coffin, he put a sword in my side, and he said, go get him, girlfriend. And I have. The amazing things that God can do are really just the beginning, because more than anything else, what's amazing is what God does do. The devil seeks to steal, kill, and destroy, but God does release, revive, and restore. I have seen it 1,000 times in myself and other people. So I'm here today to challenge you. I'm here today to challenge you to ask the question, what if, in your life? What if God can free me of this pornography that I have been chained to for the last 15 years of my life? What if God can heal and restore this broken body that has been in pain for the last 42 years? What if this marriage with two people who have grown so far apart that they don't recognize each other or themselves anymore can be restored? What if this broken, dead-end life that I have all but given up on can be redeemed by God, who has a plan for it that is miraculous and is only for you in your life? What if? What if is a question that takes the faith of a mustard seed. It's nothing. But it says in the Bible, God says that if you have the faith of a mustard seed, there is nothing you cannot do, because there is nothing that your God will not do for you. Thank you.
Hey, welcome. We're back after that interview with Kate. Or actually, that was more of her sharing a testimony story. But now we've got Kate with us. We're here to ask her a few questions. Thank you, Kate, very much for opening up, being vulnerable, and sharing what God's doing in your life. That really means a lot, and we know it takes courage to do that. So thank you. We just had a couple questions. We wanted to go back and forth and get to know you a little bit more and get to know, how God did this thing in your life. And so we're going to ask them, and that's what this next segment is. So the first question I had, which I'm sure a lot of people struggle with pornography. The stats are pretty broad. This isn't like a new novel thing. You're not unique in that regard. When did you feel like, because I know there is kind of like a hopelessness when you say you're not going to do something, but you keep doing it. You say you're not going to do it, you keep doing it. When did you get to the point where you felt like, you know what, I might actually be getting free? Because it sounds like when you were at that dinner, but I would imagine there's like some other point like further along where you're like, hey, this is working. Like, God's doing something. And can you explain that?
Sure. I'm actually really glad you asked that, because I originally was going to tell all of that, and I cut it out for time's sake. So I actually did not get free of pornography at all in the purity group that I started attending for Crew. I learned a lot of interesting things. I met a lot of great people. I was freed of some really deep shame from things that I hadn't shared with people, but I was not free of it at all. Even after I moved in with my best friend, I was not, even as an accountability partner who shared everything with me. It really honestly was that one moment where God stepped in and just broke it off. And he did not take the desire away from me. I still had it really strongly for probably a year and a half, and sometimes it even still crops up to this day. But I could say no after that. It wasn't, before it was like a no, and I would say no, 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 and then I would fall, inevitably. I mean, the longest I ever went was a month, and after that, never made it more than probably like a day or so after that. But that one night when we were praying, it was like, it was very literally like, there was something, it was very literally like there was something around my neck, and he just broke it off, and that bond that I had to it was just shattered. And even though there was still that brokenness in me that wanted to go towards it, I just wasn't helpless to it anymore. I just don't know how to say it other than he overcame it. He just really did. And then he let me build the reps up and saying no to it, and being able to face it, and being like, you just don't have anything over me anymore. And in other people too, which has been really cool.
That's cool.
So
awesome. My second question then, thank you for answering that, is, so this is just a curiosity question. Like, what sort of stuff were you guys praying for that night? You just call up your friend? You guys normally, hey, can you pray for me? Got any prayer requests? Oh yeah, can you pray for this to be free, for me to be free from this? Or like, what was going on in your heart? Because I know sometimes, like, when I have a prayer request, people go, "You have a prayer request?" I'm just like, nah. Because I'm like, the things I have are so big, I don't really feel like explaining them. And hey, I'm like, God knows my heart. You know,
Right.
Holy Spirit's interceding for me. That's me being lazy on prayer. I think we should all pray. But what sort of things were you guys praying about, and what led you to bring that up?
So after I met my best friend, I attended a women's conference at her church, and God really started moving. And the stuff that her disciple, whom I met, who God introduced me to, that I talked about, or I should say, who introduced me to God, that stuff that she talked about, I started seeing it. And not only did I start seeing it, but I started doing it. Those things that I thought didn't happen anymore. And I started seeing God work through me, even in my brokenness and my addiction and all of the stuff still going on in my life. And not only change my life, but change other people's lives. Through that process, I started attending that church, and I met this amazing group of women, just this amazing group of young women like me. And I formed really close partnerships with all of them. And so what we did is we had this Facebook message chat, and we were just constantly going back and forth and praying for each other. And you know, when we were struggling, we went in the message chat, and everybody would. It was like a strike squad for God. And so something would happen, and we would all start praying, and things happened, and God moved. I mean, I can't even tell you the stuff that happened. I literally can't. But he just did miracle after miracle after miracle, and he didn't stop. It was incredible. And so that night, God had laid in our hearts to pray for a certain one of our friends, and he had laid on my best friend and I's heart to reach out to another member of that group and to get together on the phone and pray for her. And we all kind of were struggling with the same thing at the time. So we were pretty much in a battle for her at that point. And we were fighting something pretty serious. And the devil decided to strike at me, and he actually struck at me about the pornography and about what that looks like spiritually. And I don't know if it's an analogy or if it's real what happens, but it is unspeakably horrific. It is unspeakably horrific, and it was incredibly traumatic. But what God did is he showed me the whole story. And he showed me that through that process, he was standing next to me. And he was holding my hand, and he was holding my life, even when I had completely let go of him. And that gave me the strength to face it. And then after that, he did the symbolic or literal or whatever it was, breaking of the collar. And that was that.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Kate. Thanks for answering that. That was really cool to hear, and just to share about how God works and how he's with you, even in days where you felt like, man, it's dark there, I don't want to remember, and God's like, I'm still there. That's a really cool and powerful analogy. And thanks for sharing it too. That's you're a brave person. So the next question is, this is probably a lot, you said a lot of the time, you had pornography addiction struggles, so that probably took up a lot of time and mental energy. So when you didn't do that anymore, like, what sort of stuff did you start doing instead? Because obviously you don't just your brain's always doing something. It's never like really idling. At least mine can idle. I've heard women's brains can't. So I'm sure, especially. Did you replace it with like some healthy habits, or was there like a cool thing that God led you to? What's helped you kind of, you said, put in the reps to be able to, like, you're a child of God, he's with you, but like, what sort of stuff practically did kind of change in your life?
Good question. Let me preface that with like a little bit of a little quick story. So I talked about the breakdown that I had, the anxiety breakdown. What I did during that time is I really didn't do a lot of pornography for probably about a period of 6 months right before that. The problem is that I thought I was winning against the addiction, and really the addiction had just taken on another form, which I think happens to a lot of people. And that was the form of busyness for me. It can be any number of things, obviously. I exercised to the point of not being able to feel my limbs. I I was going to school full-time with a pretty heavy credit load, and I also worked about 50 hours a week. I was involved in a whole bunch of things. I was in like 3 different intramural sports. I was worshiping busyness, and the worst part was I didn't have any free time, and I mean that very literally. I got up really early. I had a really long, full day. I collapsed at the end of the day. I woke up and I did it again for like 6 months. And I thought I was winning against pornography. I thought I was doing so good. I was really proud of myself. I was really proud of my heavy workload and all of that stuff. And I ended up putting myself in the ER. I had a very, like I said, very, very public, very embarrassing breakdown, and some lady from Petco had to carry me out of the store with my mother. And thank you, lady from Petco. The thing was, trying to beat it on my own hadn't worked all of those years, and trying to fill my time and trying to fill my headspace with other things. You know, those are the tricks that you're taught. And I don't know if they work for other people. I know they certainly did not work for me, and they've not worked for other people that I've talked to. And it's not that the idea isn't bad, but the problem is addiction is a heart problem. It's a brokenness inside of you. And it's not about what you're addicted to. It is all about what you're believing about yourself and what you're believing about God. Mm. And what I believed was that I was worthless and I wasn't able to be loved. And I didn't go seeking pornography. Pornography found me. And then after that, I couldn't stop. But, you know, there were doors that were open beforehand that allowed that in, even at that age, because there's sin in my life. So, to answer your question, rather than filling my time, I was freed up. And I had ability and space. And what naturally happened was God filled that. And I can say, you know, people say this sometimes, and I know that we kind of brush it off and we laugh it off and say, yeah, it's Christianese. But I can say that God is my best friend, because I can say that I talk to him and he talks to me more than I do with any other person. God and I are tight. And the reason why that has remained defeated in my life, and why I had the strength to say no even when I really didn't want to, even after he broke that collar off, was because he meant more to me than anything else. And that was something that he did simply by being in my life. So I guess you could say God filled that space. But he gave me a freedom.
Just kind of recapping, so it wasn't like activities that filled your time that set you free. You're saying like this relationship you had with God and how the value that you had on him, suddenly you didn't want to do that. And, or if I'm saying it wrong, basically like the relationship you had was more of the thing that took up whatever mental energy or space, more than an activity or a busyness.
Yes. Let me clarify even a little bit more. It's like a garden, okay? Let me use an analogy here. And if I'm the garden, the stuff planted in me was doing nothing but sucking from me. All these gross, ugly weeds as far as the eye can see, and rocks sucking the life from me. And that was the pornography. And the longer that went on, the more of me was covered by all of these evil, unhealthy things. And the more twisted I became, and I got twisted like you wouldn't believe. So what God did first, that night, starting that night, is he started pulling the weeds. And he pulled the weeds, and then what happened naturally is the soil, that was me, was able to be filled up with nutrients. And how is soil filled up with nutrients? Well, it needs sun, it needs water. God, and the Word of God. I jumped into the Word of God when I started asking that what if question like you wouldn't believe. I was scared, I was skeptical. And so I was in like 8 different devotionals daily. I was reading, I was looking up articles online, I was seeking people's opinions, I was praying like mad. But more than any of that, the difference between that and what I had done before was that God was actually a part of it. And I wasn't trying to do it myself. Because I don't know if you've ever weeded before.
I have. It sucks.
It sucks.
It's a waste of time.
It's a waste of time. And that's why we have these huge industrial machines that just pick everything up, and we've got all of these pesticides that keep the weeds from growing.
Yeah.
But God does it a little bit more holistically. So all of that to say that he didn't change my behavior. I feel like, and I'm not attacking the church, but there's such a rhetoric in many Christian lives and many Christian books and many Christian things about controlling your behavior and 5 simple steps to fix something and all of this stuff. And the thing is that Christianity and life, because walking with God is life, is not about controlling your behavior, it's about walking with the Savior. Mm-hmm. And when I started walking with the Savior, my behavior naturally changed. It's not a formula, and you can't force it. You need Him, and He fixes it just by walking with Him.
What's going on now? What are you learning now? What are you reading in the Bible? What's God put on your heart? What are you doing now?
I don't even know where to start.
It's all right. You're editing it, so you can ramble if you want.
Oh my God! When I started attending that church and I started asking that what if question.
Yeah, what church was it? Sorry.
It's a River of God. It's a small church, a really great church.
Okay.
It's over by Fleet Farm. And really, that week, those 2 weeks where that young lady that introduced me to God was staying with us, because she had stayed with us for a couple weeks and just talked my ear off, but it was good. That was when he started entering into my life, right? And that was when I started asking what if and started giving things to him. And I had pride problems like you wouldn't believe, because I had insecurity problems like you wouldn't believe. But really what held me back in most cases was fear. That's another thing. I mean, I feel like a lot of Christians slap the word pride on it, and it's like, you know what? Sometimes pride is not the problem. Sometimes there's a totally different problem there, and misdiagnosing the problem is pretty, I can say from experience, not a good thing.
Yeah.
When I started looking past that fear, and when God started working to remove it, he definitely stopped. So, I mean, I could tell you stories about God dropping on my heart to tell a woman that I had never met before that somebody was coming to shoot her and her daughter. This guy was, and she needed to get out of the house, and it was true, and it saved their lives. I could tell you stories about healing. I could tell you stories about breaking off of addictions. Those things that I mentioned at the end of the talk, I said this because I've seen them. And not only have I seen them, I've met many people who have seen and experienced them. So I know that it happens because I've seen it. As for what he's doing in my life, he's just never stopped. It is always something. And it's not always something it's always something. It's always something as in there is always something he's overcoming. There's always something he's refining. And the wonderful thing about God is he never makes me feel inadequate. And he never makes me feel like I'm broken, even though I am in so many areas, because he sees me as whole. I remember one time I said that I struggled with fear, and I had seen God. It was fairly early on in our relationship, but I had seen God do all these amazing things, so I knew that there was nothing he couldn't overcome, and I decided that I didn't want to be afraid anymore. Not his timing, my timing, right here, right now. And he said, yeah, let's wait. Just walk with me. It'll take care of itself. And I said, no, now. And he said, okay. And a couple hours later, I was on the couch like this, dead, because he had made me go through every one of my fears, like 631 fears or something like that. Unbelievable amount of fears, and I was empty. And the thing was, he'd overcome all of them, and they were all, in that moment at least, broken off of me, and I wasn't afraid of anything, but I had this deep despair because I was like, I'm so broken. I mean, 631 fears. I can't do anything. I can't do anything you're calling me to. There's no way.
Yeah.
And you know what he said to me? He said, Kate, I believe in you. And I said, okay, God. And I gathered up my courage and I gathered up my strength and I said, I believe in you. He said, no. And you know what? I didn't believe in me, and I still don't most of the time. But the funny thing is about God's belief is that God knows. We think and we imagine and we have our logic, which is ridiculous because we're so limited, right? But God is always perfectly rational. God is always perfectly logical. And God is always perfect because he knows and he's God. So when God says, you can do this, God means you can do this. And even if that means that he's doing it through you, for you, it's still possible. So all of that to say that he hasn't stopped. So I can't even bring into scope what he's doing right now because it is so unbelievably massive. And it is so, it'd be like giving you my entire life story. I could write a book every week.
Yeah.
And he's not going to stop because that's the kind of God he is.
Awesome. That's awesome. Sorry, it was a very broad question. Appreciate you hit the nail on the head. That's kind of what I was looking for. Like, what's he doing now? And you answered that. So we just want to say thank you, Kate, for coming on this week and sharing what God's doing. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. And really appreciate you, to give him glory there. We're wrapping up the second episode here. So you guys can subscribe to our channel. I think there's a link below. There's like a little bell notification you can hit, so when we upload a new video, you can see it. We got a bunch of awesome things coming up in the future. We'll have all the links in the description below. So wanted to once again thank you, Kate, and
Thank you.
My name's Tim.
I'm Panita.
We will see you guys next time for episode 3 of Salty Light. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, you
Maybe
can
we change the battery too before.
Yeah, I'll change it.
Yeah, because it's blinking the red. So.
Just hit record and then we'll just start talking.
Oh, we're
To
rocking.
be very honest.
All right.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, what am I supposed to say?
Give a silence first. So where's editing it? No. I'll say it for you, then you say it. Hi, my name's Lydia. Welcome back to the YouTube channel Salty Light. We're here. We're trying to bring fresh content every month back to you about new stories about what God's doing in other people's lives. This week we're introducing, and then this week Tim is with me, and you can say that. Hey everybody, my name's Tim, and I'm really excited to introduce to you Kathryn.
In the zone, Dumke.
Kathryn Danger Dumke.
Okay, you need to stop talking.
What
Ready?
about-
Okay, stop talking. Let me do it. Let me do it. That was really good, except I was losing it the whole time.
I want to make a joke at Lydia. Can I make a joke at your expense, and you can get me back later? I was going to say, what are you even doing here? Good question.
It's blooper material.
Can you hit us with a ka-chow?
Ka-chow.